Hello and welcome to Brainwaves episode 160, bringing you the best in tabletop gaming news. I'm Ian McAllister.
My name is Oliver Kinner.
And I'm Jamie Adams, and this is the headline for the week of Monday the 14th of April 2025. Trump tariffs turn the tabletop world topsy-turvy. All this and more on this episode of Brainwaves.
On the 2nd of April, President Donald Trump revealed the tariffs he had so long promised as part of his re-election campaign. No country was immune, including the Heard and McDonald Islands, which are populated only by seals and penguins. Tariffs are taxes imposed by a government on incoming goods, usually with an eye to raising revenue to try to encourage the domestic manufacturing of those goods. The one of interest to the tabletop hobby was the massive 54% levied against imports from China. The tariff went into effect on the 5th of April. The majority of tabletop games are made in China, and companies large and small across the hobby have been reacting with dismay to the news. One of the first to post anything was Steve Jackson Games. Describing the tariffs as a seismic shift, CEO Meredith Placco laid out what it meant for their bottom line.
Here are the numbers. A product we might have manufactured in China for $3 last year could now cost $4.62 before we even ship it across the ocean. Add freight, warehousing, fulfillment, and distribution margins, and that once $25 game quickly becomes a $40 product. That's not a luxury upcharge, it's survival math.
Meredith goes on to say that manufacturing games in the US is just not possible at the moment due to the many myriad components they need made and the lack of infrastructure that exists. They address the large implications of tariffs.
Tariffs, when part of a long-term strategy to bolster domestic manufacturing, can be an effective tool, but that only works when there's a plan to build up the industries needed to take over production. There's no national plan in place to support manufacturing for the types of products we make. This isn't about steel and semiconductors. This is about paper goods, chipboard, wood tokens, plastic trays, and colour-matched ink. These new tariffs are imposing huge costs without providing alternatives, and it's going to cost American consumers more at every level of the supply chain.
Board Game Wire interviewed several companies about the tariffs. Robert DiMeglio, production director at War of the Ring publisher Ares Games, said,
My gut reaction was the board game industry in the USA will be killed by these tariffs, together with the rest of the US economy.
Robert goes on to say that they think the industry will tend towards fewer high-end products and will try to have less of a reliance on Chinese manufacturing and American consumers. Over on Stonemaier Games, Jamie Stegmaier, in a post titled The Darkest Timeline, laid out what he sees as the issues and potential futures of the industry. Like DiMeglio, he believes that publishers will concentrate on smaller games and that those companies with low cash reserves are least able to weather the storm. He says this in the post.
Crowdfunding and direct sales, online and at conventions, will become the backbone of most publishers. Tariffs will have a smaller impact on those direct prices than on retail prices, which involve a multiplier so distributors and retailers have sustainable margins. There'll be far more games that are available exactly once and never again. Also, as proposed by GameFound, we'll probably see crowdfunding platforms allow creators to select different prices for customers in various regions due to tariffs.
He rounds up that post by saying that it is a lose-lose-lose for everyone involved. GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association, a US organization that represents publishers and retailers, said this in a news release.
The latest imposition of a 54% tariff on products from China by the administration is dire news for the tabletop industry and the broader US economy. As an industry highly dependent on producing goods overseas and importing them into the US, this policy will have devastating consequences. Tariffs are essentially taxes on consumers, not on the countries where the products are produced. Publishers will be forced to pass these costs along to their customers or face the prospect of ceasing operations. Nearly a third of all US consumer goods, including clothes, food products, appliances, cars, and entertainment items like games, are imported. This means higher prices across the board as all these products will need to increase price to compensate for these new Trump taxes.
Cephalofair Games, the publishers of Gloomhaven, put out a statement on the tariffs which includes many links to press releases from other companies. Price Johnson, COO of Cephalofair, starts that statement by saying this.
Speaking bluntly, our industry, our jobs, and our projects are under attack by volatile and self-inflicted US trade policy. Our manufacturing costs in the last 2 months have seen an increase of 104% due to US tariffs.
Price goes on to back up statements from others we have quoted that moving manufacturing to America is a short-term non-starter, that margins are incredibly tight on tabletop gaming products, predicting retail prices and future planning are impossible under a regime that changes its mind on a whim, that games that can get made will get more expensive, and that these tariffs will likely see the end of many games companies. Towards the end of the post, under the heading, What can you do to help? Price says this.
Support your favorite publishers, favorite local game stores, and creators however you can. Understand that indie publishers, first-time publishers, and crowdfunding publishers, like us, that funded prior to tariffs are hurting the most and have the most difficult path forward.
Some companies have already announced that they are cancelling projects, and many across the industry are asking customers to be kind to companies as the tariffs take their toll. Any company mid-crowdfunding is going to have a very hard time at making the numbers add up. We've spoken to a couple of publishers who have been good enough to share their stories with us. First up is Richard Kelly, who is an indie RPG publisher, mostly through itch.io. I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Kelly, who's a small RPG publisher. What is it you do, Richard? Can you give our audience an idea of the sort of how you're involved in the tabletop gaming industry?
Sure. I'm an RPG publisher and designer. I primarily produce and publish my own works. I've also published with some other indie presses, and I do freelance on the side. I have over 200 RPGs and RPG supplements published on itch.io. Everything's human-made, and I generally do a couple of crowdfunds a year to produce print versions of my various books.
Okay, and we've got you on obviously to talk about the tariff situation in the States, which is constantly evolving, now up to 125% against China, where a majority of certainly a majority of board games are made. When you go around printing your books, where do you get those printed? Do you get those printed in China, or do you get print locally? How do you do it?
So for me, I've designed my whole process in as defensive a way as possible. My goal has been to avoid situations in which I lose money, even if it means giving up some situations in which I could make money. So my process is centered around PDF and generally uses drive-throughs print on demand to fulfill print books. And print books are generally offered as part of a successful crowdfund. Or over time, I'll set up print on demand for books that I haven't done a crowdfund for, but do want to have a print option. So it's very much the audience's choice whether to pick up things on print or not.
Sure. So you'll have been affected by the recent price rises that Drive-Thru announced for their print on demand products?
I have built my approach in such a way to minimize things like this affecting me. But I built my process in this way because I was concerned about this sort of economic uncertainty.
Sure.
And that concern has forced me to avoid having developing more as a business. If
Sure.
I don't know what international pricing is going to be like from day to day, let alone month to month, it makes it very difficult to plan and run a crowdfund that offers international rewards.
So with the change of tariffs and, as you say, like the constantly changing situation from the Trump administration and them backing off most of the tariffs now for, I think it's 90 days, they've said, apart from the China tariffs, how do you sort of see that affecting your model and like what you can produce in the future?
Well, when the economy is running on sort of like a roulette wheel type philosophy, it does limit my ability to plan anything long term.
Sure.
And I've already built my process in such a way that as long as we have internet infrastructure, I can distribute PDFs. But if any kind of economic disruption happens to digital sales, that would affect me. Anything that limits the ability for people to freelance between countries. I've worked with a number of artists from around the world, and they're fantastic, and I'd love to keep working with them. If some sort of tariff structure or regulation is introduced that interferes with that, that creates difficulties for me as well. And for any of the single A's and the double A's and everyone above me who has an actual carefully constructed international printing and shipping process, they're all horrifically disrupted by this.
Yeah. How do you sort of see the wider industry changing because of these tariffs? I mean, I know there's several companies that have started to cancel Kickstarters. They're saying obviously things are going to have to change. There might be more direct to sale direct to consumer sales rather than going through retailers to try and get back some of the margin they're going to lose through tariffs. What do you see as the implications for the wider RPG industry that you're involved in?
At least from my spot in the indie, the two general positions that I've seen have been kind of scared and uncertain. There are certainly ways to adapt to any condition, but that's really difficult to do when you don't know what the condition is going to be. We're currently at the majority of tariffs are on China, and a smaller tariff is proposed for everybody else. With the previous tariff structure being delayed out to 90 days, but that could change overnight. And so from where I'm standing, most of my peers in the indie and everyone further up the chain isn't able to make good long-term plans, and that's really disruptive to the business at a very basic level.
Of course. Do you know anyone who's sort of like mid crowdfunding, maybe got books printed or products printed in China that are kind of on the boat and that are now going to get hit by tariffs upon landing in the US?
I suspect that is probably going to be more the case in the AAs.
Yeah.
The volume that I produce in is not gigantic.
Sure.
And therefore I don't require an overseas printing operation and complex shipping or things like that. It's just me. I don't have any employees or long-term contractors who could help me manage that. But if you look at any of the bigger presses, even the bigger indies, that do use that kind of process, I don't know what their way forward is if all the tariffs come into effect. Yeah.
And we're just going to have to wait to see if they do. Well, thanks very much for your time, Richard. Really appreciate you speaking to us about the situation. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you.
Our second interview is with Terry Latorco, the managing editor of Monte Cook Games, an RPG publisher based in the States. I'm delighted to be joined by Terry Latorco, who's the managing editor and project manager at Monte Cook Games. How are you doing, Terry?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you're involved in Monte Cook Games and what Monte Cook Games is for our listeners who don't know?
Absolutely. So Monte Cook Games is a decade-old RPG company founded by Monte Cook himself, who's come from a storied background working on games like Dungeons & Dragons, Vampire the Masquerade. And now, over the last 10 years, we've launched games such as Numenera, we've launched the Cypher system, and we've done games powered by the Cypher system, including licensed games like the Magnus Archives and Old Gods of Appalachia, which are based on rather popular podcasts. And we also create innovative RPG experiences as well. The last one, it was a game called The Darkest House, which when we crowdfunded, it was an app-driven game specifically for, initially designed specifically for remote play. And games of that sort. So we're not just stuck into a single system. Monty is quite visionary in terms of what kinds of games he's continuously, inspired by and creating.
Fantastic. And of course, we've got you on today to talk about the tariffs that are now currently sitting at 125% against China. Of course, China's where most sort of board games, card games, and that kind of thing are made. Do Monte Cook do a lot of printing in China?
Yeah, so before I was at Monte Cook Games, I was also the senior marketing manager at Renegade Game Studios, which is a much more focused company. And both companies, anything that comes in a box, you can assume that box came from China. So one of our biggest, most ambitious games is called Invisible Sun. It came in a black cube.
I know Invisible Sun. Yeah.
it's quite heavy. It's sizable, more than like 10 pounds. This is a substantial game. And that whole box was manufactured in China. And so it is such a substantial box that it is not the kind of game that in that format that we could sell at retail, for example, because it would just be it would be totally outside the realm of reasonable costs.
Yeah.
So that was one of the games we actually ended up selling direct to consumers through our crowdfunding campaigns and sell through our site, but it's not something that has ever gone to retail. But we've had smaller games, our box games, including one of our most popular games, which is called No Thank You Evil, which is an RPG that Shaun Newman has designed. That is a great way to get kids into role playing. And that box, that game set, all of the supplements and components, all made in China. And so, we have our books, which are published and printed in Canada as of right now. But when the tariffs against Canada first came up, those were also things we were reconsidering as well. But you can assume that when it comes to North American published games, if it comes in a box, if it has plastic, it has absolutely come from the East. It probably has come from China.
So what's the reaction been internally to the Trump tariffs against China?
In terms of our own production and production management, we've gone through anything that is being made in China. We have looked at those items component by component and tried to see if there are alternatives and considered alternatives. At whether it was like 54%, 58%, 104%, 125%, any of those numbers, at this point, it could be 1,000%, because it doesn't matter. It has made producing in China, printing games in China, a non-starter. For most game companies, the manufactured cost of goods is it cannot be swallowed at retail prices, at a price point that a consumer would feel comfortable paying, right?
Sure.
And so we've had to look at, what are our options? What can we create? What we've been looking at, local printers, some of them, what we can do with our current partners in Canada who are printing our books, and whether or not they can do other things for us. And ultimately, one of the things that we're running into, and I'm sure a lot of other companies are running into, is capacity, right? There are game printers in Europe who do print games, but they're quite a capacity already. And, it's not as though there are the infrastructure for making games, for printing games in North America exists, right? The sophistication when it comes to making games is quite high. It's more than just making a box and making cards. If you have a modern board game, everything that is customized, whether it's the insert, the tokens, the die cut punch board, all of that is made bespoke, right? And it's something that we don't have the capacity for as of right now. And in order to build that capacity, that takes years, right? We're talking a length of time that it's not just like move a factory here. You not only have to create the infrastructure for it, have the machines and the facilities for it. You also have to train the people, right? And all of that experience, all of that knowledge exists elsewhere. And because of that specialization, because of that expertise, we went there, and many companies went there. So
not to mention, if you want to set that stuff up domestically, a lot of the machines you buy from China.
Exactly.
You come back into the same problem again.
Exactly, and so it is not as simple as just saying, okay, well, move your factories or move your capacity here. Most companies that make games are like, even apart from the large toy companies that make games, right? Like the Hasbros out there, most role-playing game companies, most board game companies, even the largest ones. When you think of companies like ourselves, we're a sizable company in the role-playing game space, but we're 13 full-time employees. By any other measure, we would be considered an indie game company, right? Renegade Game Studios, similarly sized. They're not a large company, despite the fact that they have like this huge capacity, huge footprint within the industry. Our industry is still quite small. So even if one of the largest board game companies who are making modern games, the kinds of games that we'd be talking about for people who would be listening to this podcast, right? We're not talking about Monopoly here. We don't have the capacity to just like build a factory and print our own games, right? It's something that is of a scale that is beyond us. So the solutions that are kind of bandied about are not viable solutions for at least our industry, the tabletop industry.
And certainly not in the short term. You'd be talking about
certainly
investment and development. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that's it's not necessarily the options available to smaller publishers out there are quite limited. Like even Stonemaier Games, right? Like they're not they're huge when it comes to tabletop and the splash they make and the popularity of their games. But let's be perfectly honest, they're not going to build a factory just to print Wingspan, right? Like it's still a relatively small game, and it has not, even as the breakout hit that it is not selling enough copies to even qualify owning the means of production for that game.
No, of course not.
It takes a lot of partnerships to do that. So, it's not. It is something that I know a lot of publishers are facing right now, where they may not have the same flexibility that we do as a role-playing game company. We have a little bit more flexibility. We have partners because book printers are everywhere, thankfully. And the majority of our products are books.
Is that where you think that Monte Cook will sort of switch to? They'll sort of move more towards just books, not like the box sets and that kind of thing that you've mentioned previously?
I think that for our plans for the games that we're making and we're planning to make, they were all like, most of our products are books as they are. They're role-playing games, which
sure,
for the most part come in as books. And so that is. But when it comes to like, if we have to do a reprint of No Thank You Evil, we're going to have to look at that whole box again. We may have to reassess every component in that box. We may have to look at exactly what's going in it. We announced Invisible Sun Indigo, and there have been some mock-ups of the new box for Invisible Sun, essentially. And that was one of the products we were just looking into because we have announced it, because we were planning on crowdfunding it in the very short term. In near future, that's a product we have had to look at component by component and think, okay, is this something that's worthwhile? Is this something that we can make in China? If we make the insert in China, what does that actually cost us? And can we do the rest somewhere else? And looking at other options available to us, because again, we are fortunate enough to be a sizable enough company to have, for example, our own warehouse. Not all companies have their own warehouse, have their own space to assemble games if they needed to. We've assembled some of our supplements using our warehouse folks and been able to do that. But for when it comes to board game companies who have that capacity, it's like us. I've seen CMON do stuff like that in the past, but the vast majority of publishers don't have that. They rely on their distribution partners to warehouse and hold their games, for example. So it's a whole other layer that you need a certain size of operation to even just have that ability to pivot, right? And the smaller you are, the more vulnerable.
Does Monte Cook Games find itself at the moment in the midst of any crowdfunding campaigns? Like you've got the products kind of printed or about to be printed in China on the boat. And you're going to be hit by tariffs as things arrive, and how's the company handling that, if so?
We're looking at options. There are a lot of our manufacturing partners and our distribution partners have some solutions that will help in the short term. For example, we may, in terms of our logistics, we're
Sure.
trying to figure out ways that if a game is in the past, if a game was going to be fulfilled to a backer in Australia, that game would still land in our American warehouse, then be redistributed out to our fulfillment partners in Australia, or maybe in the UK if it was going to Europe. And so if we were to import that copy into our US warehouse, we'd have to pay a tariff on it. We're working with our partners to find solutions so that we don't have to bring those games to our US warehouse to then go
more
back
direct
out again.
to the countries involved instead, through America and then back out.
There are logistical solutions for that. There are, and we have products that were not on a boat when the cutoff date was yesterday. If they were on a boat yesterday, right, they were not on the boat. They were printed. They're sitting at a port, but they were not on a boat. And so those products will absolutely be affected. And, we are swallowing that loss, essentially. We're swallowing that extra cost for those products. Because, that's just how we are choosing to do business. And
sure.
we're going to keep rolling. We're fortunate enough to be able to absorb those costs for right now, but it's not a long-term thing. This is not something we can do moving forward. No. So, which is why we're working and constantly looking for solutions. This is still so, while it was telegraphed, it's still quite new, and the escalation has been so quick.
And changing constantly.
And perpetually changing, right? Like 2 days ago, there was tariffs everywhere for everything, no matter what. Yeah. And then those were paused, 24 hours ago. And so,
it wouldn't surprise me by the time we put this cast out if the tariffs have completely disappeared and this conversation is basically mute.
Or not, right? But I think anyone who loves games, whether they buy their games from the retailer, their local game store, or they back on Kickstarter or BackerKit, they are going to be affected directly, no matter what.
Yeah.
So whether or not these tariffs hit, there is absolutely going to be waves in our industry in terms of just how we handle and prepare and think about our own production. Because
how do you think it's going to sort of affect your long-term planning at Monte Games, if you can speak to that at all, with the constantly fluctuating changes?
It's hard to say right now, right? Like right now, I think a lot of publishers, ourselves included, are battening down the hatches and just thinking in the short term. What are the things that are, say, at a port that will be going on a boat, and how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to approach that? How are we going to handle those things? Because even those things, those products are going to backers. Some of them in America, some of them not. We're changing on the fly how we are dealing with those products. Like 2 weeks ago, those products would have come in to our warehouse and gone out as normal. Now we're shifting and we're adjusting, and so when it comes to what that looks like right now, we're all in a. I think a lot of publishers are in a batten down the hatches, wait and see. This is it feels like a bit of a hurricane, right? It's come in.
Yeah.
It already has made, damaged stuff, right? Like there's already been quite a bit of damage, and it has caused a lot of uncertainty, which also, is its own kind of harm to the industry. And but we have to see how it all settles out, right? Like we have to come out and actually assess what everything looks like. And we, in a place where things are changing so quickly, it is hard to make any plans for the future. And so that in and of itself is is quite a challenge to overcome.
Yeah. Would you like to make any little predictions maybe for what you see as like how the tariffs will sort of shape the industry over the short term?
So, like as a fan, and then as someone who has come into games some 20 years ago even, and came in through a local game store, I worry first and foremost about those local game stores. If you love your local game store, this is the time to be supporting them, because the uncertainty hits them the most. They tend to have the least amount of options available to them to weather the cost, right? Like the games that they want to stock, they're provided to them at that price. There's no negotiating. They cannot look at the components in that box and go, well, I want this, I don't want this. I could save a bit here and there. No, that's just the price they pay. Their margins are already quite tight. And so if you love your local game store, and I came in through miniature wargaming, which is like very game store dependent, very community oriented, come from a TCG background. Similarly, having a space to engage with your community is really important. And
absolutely.
And those spaces are now in danger, right? Like so that's something that I am very concerned about. And I think that, and as a fan, right, as someone who supports local game stores and thinks that if you really want to, and if you are like a big fan of supporting local businesses, and tariffs might not be the best way to go about it, but certainly supporting your local game store absolutely is a good way to go about it, right? Like that money stays in your community, and that money has a bigger impact within your community because it is an owner who lives there, right? It's not going to some stockholder, some millionaire, who knows wherever, right? If unlike say if it's bought online somewhere, right? From an Amazon, Jeff Bezos doesn't need your $3 extra
no, he doesn't,
on right on that copy of Agricola, right? So I think that is one of the things that I foresee in the very short term is one of the more challenged parts of our industry, right? Retail is they're just working on tighter margins, right? They have less power and control over the product. I think when that shakes out, that's when other industry and business plans might be adjusted, right? The way we do business, the way we operate, has always been driven by our supporters, our backers, through crowdfunding campaigns, right? Like that's how we announce our games and what we're developing, what we're creating, what we're going to print, the next things we're going to do. It is completely transparent because what we're going to make has been funded by a crowdfunding campaign, has been supported by our backers. And, by being those first people, like they enable us to be able to reach out to other gamers who may not be, those early adopters of our games, through local game stores and retail and the other channels that we are able to sell our games through. So, that might be a change for other companies. They might be approaching it in that direction. I can't say for certain what that looks like, because it has taken us over a decade to build up the relationships we have with the people who back our games early on.
Sure.
To create that infrastructure, right? Like a publisher can't tomorrow just turn around and say, okay, well, we're just going to crowdfund everything, right?
They need to build the community and build that channel.
You have to build the community, and you look at companies like, again, you could companies like Stonemaier Games, right? Or James Stonemaier, and he came into the industry doing that crowdfunding campaign. CMON came out doing crowdfunding. Where that went for them, Jamie's no longer crowdfunding, and made it very, very clear. But will these changes make them pivot? Maybe. It's hard to tell right now because we're living in a state of extreme uncertainty, and even running a crowdfunding campaign itself is a very intense, resource intense, effort intense approach, right? It's very different than, making a game, working with your distribution partners, making it good, and then just, selling it out, right? There was a time, pre-COVID where you could just do that, right? A company could just show up, make this really great game and just, find a publishing partner, find a distribution partner, and it goes like hotcakes, right? Can't really do that anymore. and that's been quite a long time coming, right?
Yeah.
But that approach and that overall structure to how games are made, and how games are marketed and how games are distributed, it's hard to predict now. And I don't know if the smaller publishers necessarily have the wherewithal to put in the effort that crowdfunding can take, right? Like, we have, a lot of companies have a track record for it, but even larger companies have struggled with it, right? A lot of companies have had catastrophic success and then gone under because of that, of going through crowdfunding, but not having the capacity and built up the capacity.
Yeah.
So
we've seen troubles with people like Mythic and other publishers recently who are getting themselves into all sorts of trouble, multiple crowdfunding.
Absolutely.
And even CMON that we've mentioned as well seems to be in some issues.
Absolutely. And it's not that, they're not trying to steal, they're trying to make games, right? But it is an effort. It requires a lot more than, especially if there's an avalanche of popularity, right? It gets that much harder because you have to have that much more internal capacity for logistics, and most companies just don't have that. And so that is something that in terms of like board games, people don't necessarily think about the logistics of production, the logistics of manufacturing, but there's a lot that goes on in the background in order to make a game, to print a book. There's so much that happens in order to get a game to a shelf in a store. That these tariffs, if they force companies to shift their approach, that change itself takes time and effort, and then therefore costs money to that company. So
cool. Well, I think that's about all we have time for right now. Terry, thank you so much for coming on and chatting to us. It's great to get an insider's view on what these tariffs mean, or what they may mean. Hope they may have changed by the time this cast goes out, and probably will have. But yeah, we'll maybe be back in touch to talk to you about the permanent changes somewhere down the line.
Not a problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And I've also communicated with an indie publisher by the name of Breeze Grigas, who is a board game developer and has designed their own game called Combining Robots. They said this that they shared on a Reddit.
Have you ever been on a highway and suddenly the tolls have gone from $0 to $25,000? You can't get off. You can't escape. The concept is a horrifying nightmare, but this is my life now. And it could apparently be even more. It could be even higher without warning. It could also be lower, because maybe my shipment left early enough. Another publisher I was speaking to left before the previous tariff deadline and was charged at the increased rate anyway. I literally won't know what financial burden this is going to be until I receive the bill, and thus I can't communicate any concrete information or promises to my backers.
Thanks very much to Richard, Terry, and Breeze for speaking to us. Of course, those who've been following the news will realise we have buried the lead a little on this story. After a massive U-turn by Trump on the 10th of April, many tariffs that were promised had been delayed by 90 days. As China put in place tariffs against US goods in response to the initial tariff increases at 84%, the Trump administration has raised the tariffs on Chinese goods to 145%. The amount affecting board games is 125%, with the last 20% being specifically aimed at fentanyl-based products. China has now raised its tariffs to match this 125%. A lot of the pieces we are quoting were written at the point of the tariffs being 54%, which is why the disparity in numbers throughout the piece. Our audio interviews were all conducted after the increase to 125% was known.
My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, when I was speaking to Terry, I did joke that it's entirely possible by the time we put this piece out, we are recording on the 11th of April, Friday night in the UK, that all of this will be moot and the tariffs will have gone away. That is possible. And that is one of the problems, is the complete uncertainty, I mean, it was meant to be their liberation day, as Trump put it, this announcement of these tariffs. And he was all strongman, grr about it, and then has completely backed down in a sort of Liz Truss kind of way.
How dare you soil the name of my best friend, Liz Truss?
Let's break the stock markets and then
Liz Truss, friend of the show. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and how many of Trump's friends made out by buying stocks when they were low and then in the rebound? Yeah. I mean, they're not even trying to hide the corruption anymore, are they?
Hold on. Sorry. One second. Let's not make this board game podcast political, because the last thing we want is politics interfering with our art.
Yeah, anybody who says like keep politics out of board games, I'm sorry, folks, but politics suddenly affects board games. Who knew? Yeah, if you voted for Trump, then this is the tiger eating your face moment. If you're a board gamer and you voted for Trump, congratulations.
Unless you shorted lots of stocks, then obviously you voted for Trump for the right reasons.
Well done, I guess.
But anyway, I mean, as I said, it's
of Oliver Kinner and Ian McAllister does not necessarily represent the giant brain or as a whole.
We're not offering financial advice here.
No.
It's the uncertainty that's obviously almost the biggest thing. As we all said before, if prices increase, we've seen it with the shipping charges going up during the pandemic and all that sort of stuff. You can sort of plan for that, sort of. I know even then it was surprising, and a lot of companies had problems,
and it was very volatile as well. And we saw companies go under and all sorts of problems, and we're going to see the same with this.
But there's no predicting, and even the tariffs that haven't been put in place are delayed by 90 days. Well, allegedly 90 days. I mean, that might change. It might be 80 days or 150 days
or 9 hours.
Oh, yeah. So
who knows?
Well, let us know when you're listening to this whether what we've presented is actually still accurate.
If you're a board game publisher or RPG publisher, if you're in the industry and you're affected by tariffs, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll either get an interview with you, or we can read something out on the cast, or share it on our socials. Please do get in touch. If you do want to read more interviews and commentary on the tariffs, we do recommend the Cephalophore post that we've referenced in the piece and we'll put in our show notes. It has gathered a lot of information and links together across a variety of sites and publishers, so do go and check that out. We will no doubt be talking about this next time on the cast, so stay tuned.
Maybe we won't, because it's changed again.
Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I'm interested to see how this is going to affect conventions. Because like thinking of the big ones, you have UK Games Expo, you have Gen Con, and you have Essenspiel. And you have Tokyo Games Fair. Sorry, Tokyo Games Fair, I forgot about you. You got several of these big ones. Gen Con, massive American thing. Are people going to come to the United States, and particularly Indiana? UK Games Expo, massive American presence. Essenspiel, biggest trade fair in the world. Is that going to affect it?
Expo's got a reasonable American presence. I wouldn't say it's massive. I think the European presence probably outweighs it. I'd have to check that to know exactly, but I'm pretty sure you'll find more UK and European publishers and distributors at Expo than US in terms of like proportion.
Okay,
but I think Gen Con's problem will definitely be more. You might get arrested by ICE more than tariffs, because most of the companies are going to be locked in at this point. I mean, that's terrible for them. The ones that are going and need to import, obviously that's a huge problem for them. Depends where they're coming from, I guess. If they're coming from China, they're definitely in issues. If they're coming from Europe, they've got some extra tariffs to pay. I don't know exactly how that works with exhibiting, but I know there's been a few instances of tourists falling foul of like, you don't have the right visa, we're going to throw you in ICE detention for several days. That sort of stuff. I know people who usually go to Gen Con who are definitely not going this year because Trump's in charge. They're just like, no. It's just not worth the risk. So I think that's more the problem with like the conventions than anything else. I think the tariffs will have a knock-on effect for maybe next year's Gen Con rather than this year's, just because of the timeline and when it's come in. And like I might be wrong. I saw a few folk that were going to Gen Con saying like maybe it's best for us to just leave our games in China for now rather than try and get them imported.
Sorry, Oliver.
Who knows?
You were saying
it'll still be interesting to see whether any exhibitors pull out or go under in the meantime. I think that's
or just don't turn up and pay the fee.
If I was running an if I was running an event at the moment, I would be, talking to all the exhibitors and go, right, are you actually coming? What's happening? Can we help you? All those things. So I think that's the other side of it. It's obviously visitors. Yeah, absolutely right. People won't be traveling to the US, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's also the exhibitors, how many of them will actually still be around? How many will actually feel that they can afford to be attending? All those things. So keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Let's move on to a little update before we go to the news.
Yes, as we reported in our previous episode, CMON, cool mini or not, the US-based publisher of games such as Zombicide, Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and Ankh, issued a profit warning on the 12th of March, stating it could face losses of up to $2.1 million in 2024. Now, board game news website BoardGameWire reports that 2 weeks after the profit warning, CMON announced a delay in publishing its annual financial results for 2024. Attributing it to an understaffed finance department following key personnel changes and ongoing recruitment efforts. The company stated that releasing unaudited figures could mislead shareholders and investors and insisted that the delay would not impact its operations. Under Hong Kong Stock Exchange regulations, CMON was required to submit its results by the 31st of March. As CMON failed to do so, its stock was suspended on the 1st of April and is still not trading as of recording today, the 11th of April. Alongside announcing that it would delay the release of its annual financial results, CMON also revealed that it is seeking legal advice after two prospective investors failed to provide an agreed $1.39 million for a 16.66% stake in the business, which CMON was relying on to strengthen its working capital and liquidity. We, of course, would like to remind listeners that CMON currently have 10 outstanding Kickstarters waiting to be delivered, plus the two Kickstarters they bought from Mythic Games, Hell and Anastair. So, add to that the tariffs. CMON has done a good job causing problems for themselves. But the tariffs will probably put a real end to that.
That might be the nail in the coffin, really, with those outstanding Kickstarters and the two they bought from Mythic, which we'd also like to remind our listeners those projects have not had any updates in the time since the Cool Mini or not have bought them from Mythic. There's been no updates. So who knows what's happening with those. Yeah, it doesn't look good.
No.
Mind you, I was sort of saying before we recorded that maybe delaying those Kickstarters will actually work in their favor, because by then those tariffs might have disappeared. Who knows? So there's hope yet, maybe. Anyway, it's bad news, certainly from CMON. So if you're involved in any of those, if you've supported any of those Kickstarters, good luck with that. And as we keep saying at these points, Kickstarter, like other crowdfunding campaigns, are not shops. You're not, legally supported. If some things go wrong, you're supporting a project. If that fails, your money is not necessarily guaranteed, even though GameFund, I think, has some sort of guarantees in place. But yeah, ultimately, you're supporting a project, you're not buying a product.
Yeah. Just remember, you do have to click that button that says, I understand that I may not get my game or my product. This is one of those times. But enough of that, moving on to the rest of the news. In a post on their website, board game publisher Unexpected Games announced on the 28th of March that Cory Konieczka will be retiring as head of studio. Cory Konieczka is perhaps best known as the designer of Battlestar Galactica, the board game, Eldritch Horror, and a co-designer on Twilight Imperium 4th edition. Unexpected Games is an Asmodee studio known for games such as The Mandalorian Adventures, 3000 Scoundrels, and Voices in My Head, and was founded by Cory in 2019 to create novel, fun, thematic, and accessible games. In their news post, Unexpected Games thanked Cory for his contributions to the company and the tabletop industry as a whole, saying,
"His vision, talent, and passion for designing great games will continue forward with the ongoing support of current and future Unexpected Games titles."
Cory elaborated on his departure by saying,
"After 19 plus years making board games, I've made the difficult choice to leave Unexpected Games at the end of March to pursue other interests. With the help of many talented individuals, I had the pleasure of creating every game I could conceive of. We worked on amazing licenses, internal IPs, and fresh ideas, each providing its own rewards and challenges. After living and breathing board games for so long, my muse yearns to travel beyond the tabletop. This job provided opportunities beyond my wildest dreams and introduced me to some of the most wonderful people I've ever met. I'm forever grateful. I want to thank you, the fans, for all your support over the years. It is a rare gift to make a living designing board games, and that has only been possible because you have bought them. Seeing you play and enjoy my games over the years has warmed my heart, and I've enjoyed meeting many of you at conventions.
Unexpected Games will continue to release games after Corey's departure, including a new game system designed by Corey, and will attend Gen Con and PAX Unplugged later this year, both in America. That does seem like a big loss for the company. I mean, it's the founder, and the wider Asmodee group. I don't know what you think.
It was kind of a good get for Asmodee to move Corey to his own studio and have him make these interesting weird games that they as a sort of almost indie game studio is kind of a strange thing, but it was kind of cool. So yeah, it feels like it's a big loss for Asmodee and Unexpected Games, of course.
I can't wait to see what he does.
Just for a bit of transparency, Oliver has done paid work for Asmodee UK.
Yeah, I have.
On the 22nd of March, Greg Stafford was named the 2025 recipient of the Gary Gygax Lifetime Achievement Award. The award is presented annually at Garycon, a convention that is run in memory of Gary Gygax, the co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons, and is named after him. It recognises individuals who have made significant contributions to the gaming industry. Stafford, who passed away in October 2018, founded Chaosium in 1975, which is a publisher of role-playing games such as RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, King Arthur's Pendragon, and HeroQuest. He is considered one of the most innovative and influential game designers. The award was presented by Luke Gygax, CEO of Garycon, to Jeff Richard, Vice President and Creative Director for Chaosium, on Greg's behalf. Receiving the award, Richard said this:
Short of Gary Gygax himself, no one else is so worthy of that recognition. Thank you, Luke Gygax and Garycon.
Yeah, it's lovely to see Greg Stafford being recognised, even if it's posthumously. He was a truly influential RPG designer. Pendragon, for my money, is basically one of the early indie RPG/story game kind of thing. It's got different mechanisms in there that really push a particular type of story, rather than the more sort of trad play that you got in Dungeons and Dragons, which didn't have that kind of mechanism in it. So yeah, I really recommend giving Pendragon a look. There's a new starter set out just now. I think it's 6th edition is the current one. So yeah, the core book's out, Game Master's book's out, things like that. Yeah, it's a game I'd like to get back to at some point. Yeah, I was running the Great Pendragon campaign at one point, which is from before Arthur's birth to after his death.
Wow,
okay. Amazing!
It's a very big campaign.
Yeah.
As Ian was just talking, I realised that right next to me, I do have my Pendragon starter set for the newest edition.
Ooh, amazing!
Played it.
It's a really nice starter set. Yeah, I haven't played mine either.
Gorgeous, and also Greg Stafford name on the bottom. I was like, yeah, nice.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
It doesn't say what edition it is, but
it's 6th. I can tell you that.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the 6th.
I know he's a designer. I was just like, oh yeah. Although it just came out, 2 years ago. I'll get it done at some point.
Amy Lowe, the marketing and communications manager for GAMA, announced her resignation on the 1st of April in a now deleted LinkedIn post. This was reported on the 4th of April by ICV2, an online news outlet focusing on hobby games and graphic novels businesses. GAMA, which stands for the Game Manufacturers Association, is a trade association for the hobby games industry in the United States and owns the Origins Game Fair. Lowe's departure comes just over 6 months after joining GAMA. In her post, Lowe heavily criticized the organization, calling it
deeply siloed and in many ways broken.
Lowe cites toxic leadership, gatekeeping, and highly unprofessional behavior and disrespect towards staff and members. Describing what she saw, Lowe says this:
I witnessed staff roll their eyes at members who literally fund the organization. I saw internal dynamics that were petty, power-hungry, and counterproductive. Then came a restructuring that had me report to someone who openly disrespected colleagues and talked shit about members. I've worked in high-stakes environments, I've managed massive campaigns, I've dealt with complex teams, but I refuse to stay in a place that values ego over impact, so I resigned 2 days into the restructure.
In response to queries from ICV2, GAMA Executive Director John Stacey acknowledged recent internal changes and said this:
Over the past 8 months, GAMA has nearly doubled its staff to accommodate for our growing association. We now represent almost 1,700 tabletop game companies in 36 countries. As part of this growth, we have taken a hard look at how our staff is organised and made adjustments to better align with our 10-year strategic plan for GAMA to be the epicenter of the tabletop industry. While I disagree with Lowe's categorization of our staff, we appreciate the brief time she was with us and wish her well in her future adventures.
At the time of recording on the 11th of April, there's no official statement about Lowe's departure on the GAMA website. Mind you, the website news section hasn't been updated since the 26th of June 2024. So, anyway, I just found that a bit odd when I was looking at the website that there doesn't seem to be any news. And
definitely odd.
So, but then we have previously reported on GAMA a few times, apparently back in episode 118 in July 2024, just after the last news update on their website. And there have been, many changes and people being voted in and people moving around and boards being changed, but nothing actually changing really. So,
because Frank West was briefly on the GAMA board,
if I
remember rightly, and then came off it about like 2 weeks later. And it's always seemed like an organization that sort of bumbles through getting stuff organized and doesn't really have clear direction or leadership at all. It just seems to sort of happen and come out of it.
Oh, bit like the Labour Party. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to get political. Political.
It's just a weird organization. If it wants to become the epicenter of the tabletop game world, then it's going to have to do a lot better than this.
And as I said, there have been, really important people on working for GAMA, with GAMA, or however you want to phrase it. And then they leave. So you always think, oh, great, there's people joining who might actually be able to make a difference and actually represent the industry and all that. And then they leave. So you do wonder, well, I don't wonder anymore, but, if what Lowe says is true, then, it just carries on being a toxic company.
Yeah, they attract good talent and then that talent just instantly leaves. So that is a you problem. If that's happening over and over again, that's a company problem. That's not the people you're hiring problem. And talking about people leaving companies, Null Signal Games, the fan-populated company behind the continuation of the Netrunner card game, has recently parted company with its head of product, Kevin Tame. The reason we know this is that Kevin went to the Netrunner subreddit and posted under the title, "I was abruptly removed from NSG without any explanation." Kevin starts that post by saying,
"This weekend, I was abruptly removed from NSG without any explanation. I've been with the organisation since its inception in 2018. When FFG cancelled the game and a group of us started discussing its future in the #future channel on Slack."
He goes on to lay out his contribution to Null Signal Games and says that he was removed shortly after uploading the final files for the next expansion for the game called Elevation. He says of this timing,
"It was unprofessional and frankly disgusting."
Kevin goes on to say that the conflict has always existed within the organisation, which can happen in companies that attract passionate people. He says that over the last few months, it has gotten worse as people do not feel like they matter or belong anymore. Addressing the future of Null Signal Games, he says this.
"Over the past year, 2 executives have been bullied out and painted as villains. Another is likely to leave soon. 3 producers have quit due to unprofessional treatment. Others have been dismissed or left because constant conflicts. I cannot pinpoint exactly what has gone wrong, but the organisation is at severe risk. I hope NSG survives and Netrunner continues. I love this game and want it to thrive, but both those inside and outside NSG should be concerned."
In response, Null Signal Games put out a statement on their site and said the following about Kevin.
"Kevin controlled numerous operational bottlenecks and often took on more work than was appropriate. This single point of failure resulted in delays. He refused to delegate and resisted attempts to modify our structure or processes to solutions that were less reliant on his own contributions. Kevin directly operated NSG's product fulfillment in North America and was paid by NSG as an independent contractor for his work. This service was plagued by quality issues, and he again resisted initiatives to reshape the program. His position was responsible for facilitating EU and UK fulfillment, which suffered unacceptable delays under his leadership. Kevin was often involved in interpersonal conflict, some quite serious, with increasing frequency and intensity. This was severely impacting the mental health of many members of our team and their ability to continue to work with him."
NSG go on to say that these delays in the run-up to Elevation put the relationship at a breaking point, and that is when they ultimately decided to part ways. At the end of the post, Null Signal Games says this.
"At present, Kevin retains admin control of some of NSG's digital accounts and remains in possession of approximately $40,000 of unsold product. As of the time of this posting, he has not responded to our requests to hand over the account controls or return said product."
Kevin, for his part, says he has not locked folk out of accounts and that other people in the organization have access. He points out he could not have been so easily removed if he had locked people out of the accounts. Now, Not So Signal Games is an organization I've kind of admired for a few years, but over the last couple of years, it certainly seems to have had some problems. There's been a lot of internal division I've heard about, and this seems to be sort of the apex of that. It's a slightly strange organization that sort of claims it is basically the savior of Netrunner, and it kind of is, but also there's a much wider community that's part of that as well, like people around the globe who are not really associated with Null Signal Games, who get some prize support and that kind of thing from them a bit, but are basically out there helping them arrange tournaments and that kind of thing, and it's part of they're part of a wider community that they sometimes don't acknowledge. I think they'll still continue, but yeah, they've obviously got some problems that they need to sort out at the moment.
Paul Sawyer, ex-Games Workshop employee, former editor of White Dwarf magazine, and co-founder of Warlord Games, amongst many other things, passed away earlier this week. Last year, he fell suddenly ill at Salute, an annual tabletop skirmish event taking place in London, and was subsequently given a terminal prognosis. The following statement is from his family on his personal Facebook page.
To all that knew and loved Paul, it's with a truly broken heart that we must share the news that our beloved husband and father passed away on the evening of March the 27th, surrounded by the immense love of his family. From the very beginning of his diagnosis, he showed nothing short of heroism with his bravery and strength, and that carried through right until the end. We are truly devastated and will feel his loss forever. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the kindness that has been shared with Dad and to us as a family during his cruel battle. May he finally rest peacefully. All our love, Julie, Catherine, and Holly.
We'd just like to take a moment to have a look at jobs, opportunities, and events around the tabletop industry. As always, we recommend having a look at the Tabletop Jobs Facebook group. It's pretty decent for actually finding a job in the industry if that's what you're looking for. The Golden Geek Awards are open right now. You can vote for pretty much everything from a blog to a podcast. If you'd like to vote for us, that's great. Otherwise, we're
Go on, vote now.
Otherwise, we're just reminding you to go and vote for your favorite podcasts and board games and things like that.
You can also vote Tabletop Games blog if you want, because Oliver does do their own stuff.
There's a link in the show notes. Go and vote for Brainwaves now. Go on.
Yeah, just vote for your favorite things. You can vote for multiple things as well, I believe.
Yeah, on you go. I've got a cup of tea. I can wait.
Indeed. And if you are a tabletop RPG designer or publisher, or you're just setting out on that journey, then Ken Lowry, who is an award-winning RPG designer who operates under the imprint Bannerless Games, has got an opportunity for you. He's setting up a grant to pay it forward, as he puts it, as he has been helped out by so many people on his own journey. The grant is for $250 to help designers working on projects or setting up a business. He's accepting applications up till the end of this month and will announce the winners on May the 14th. Ken says he will likely do this again, so not to despair if you don't get in this round. And we'll put a link to the form you need in the show notes. And we'd just like to take a moment to thank all our patrons, especially our executive producers, Kevin Bertram, James Naylor, and Shaun Newman. Thank you so much for continuing to support us at that level. For just $1 a month, you can get access to some behind-the-scenes musings from us. You can also sign up as a free member on our Patreon, where I put up a little bit of extra writing each month on the things I've been playing and the interesting things I have been reading or listening to or watching around the world of tabletop writing and video making and podcasting. So yeah, you can just sign up for free to get that as well. And there are various ways to support us outside of the Patreon as well. We'll put links to all those in the show notes.
That was very colourful, wasn't it?
It was very colourful. A sort of CMYK kind of thing.
Yeah.
Incredibly colourful. Funny you mentioned CMYK. It's almost like you've read the document. CMYK, for those of you that don't know, is a games publishing company in America who handles the US distribution and publishing for games such as Co-op Climate Challenge Daybreak, Dog-Based Dice Dandy Spots, and Quacks of Quedlinburg. I can't think of any Q things. But they've just announced, now CMYK has just announced a TV show based on a game by... Oliver, do you want to say the name in case I mess it up?
Okay, Wolfgang. I can't say it now. Wolfgang.
Oh. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
going to keep that in.
Good. Designer of Quacks of Quedlinburg, amongst many others. Now, the TV show is not going to be based on Quacks, and it's not also the popular guessing game Wavelength. The game is Illusion, which CMYK is about to re-release as Figment, a game where players have to line up cards in increasing proportions of a particular colour. The TV show, which CBS is heavily involved in, will swap colours for pop culture items, and the proportion of colour for particular orders in order to win cash prizes. The show is apparently going to go out
a bit more like the card game Timeline.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I have a feeling it might not just be, put this in order of when it was invented or released or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, but I know exactly what you mean. The show is apparently going to go out next year in America, but, we'll see. Go on. Again, we've probably done this before, but we'll do this occasionally. TV show based on a board game what do you think could work?
I'd like to see a Millennium Blades TV show. That'd be amazing. Basically Yu-Gi-Oh, but more.
I was going to say, isn't that just Yu-Gi-Oh, where you just...
I know.
For those of you that don't know, Ian, Millennium Blades is a card game about card games.
Yeah, Millennium Blades is a card game about playing card game players. Very strange. Let's just check it out. It's very, very odd. I don't know if it's good. I played it once and it blew my mind, but I don't know if it's good.
No. I'm looking at my shelves, and the first one I can see is Dune. I think there's a TV show about Dune, or at least if not, I think someone's probably done something with it. Oh, there might be books. I don't know. I also see photosynthesis, and I immediately just go, yeah, we've had several David Attenborough series about.
I mean, Scroll could work,
Scroll could. I mean, that's a good point. Scroll, Telestrations,
any of those party game type.
Yeah, I am surprised that hasn't been done before. I'll be honest.
It probably has.
But we just Oh, also, speaking of which, very quickly, I think in the UK coming out very soon is a UK version of a originally South Korean TV show called The Genius, which has David Tennant as a host. Originally, it was done in South Korea, as I said, but there is a lot of board game-like elements in it. It's really interesting, so I don't know if they're going to replicate it. I remember watching the first series of The Genius, where there'd be turns in like a horse racing game or something like that. Every player got their own particular bit of information, and you had like half an hour between these turns, so it was lots of alliances and social backstabbing and social deduction, and I remember enjoying it. I'll be interested to see what they do in the UK with it.
Okay. Or Traitors was the other one.
I mean, yeah,
Indeed.
of course.
Anyway, thank you very much for listening, everyone. If you like what you've listened to, then the best way to help us out is to share the podcast and drop us a review and rating on your podcast host of choice. You can also follow Oliver at tabletopgamesblog.com. You can join our Discord. We'll put an invite in the show notes. We're all on Blue Sky. I'm giantbrain.co.uk and Oliver is Tabletop Games Blog on there. Our Facebook group is Giant Brain. Our website is giantbrain.co.uk. And if you'd like to email us about anything in the show, confidentially as well, if you'd like, your anonymity is guaranteed, then giantbrainuk@gmail.com is the email address you want. We'll be back soon with more tabletop news. See you soon.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.